The night sky above Seoul looked the same as it always had. Stars scattered across the darkness like thrown rice. Minho sat in his chair at the International Space Monitoring Station, drinking his third coffee of the shift. It was 2 in the morning, and nothing interesting ever happened at 2 in the morning. Then his screen flickered. At first, Minho thought it was a malfunction. The gravitational sensors were showing readings that made no sense. Something massive was moving beyond Jupiter, something that shouldn't exist. He checked the equipment twice, then 3 times. The readings didn't change. Jiwon, he called across the room. Can you look at this? Dr. Jiwon Park walked over, her lab coat wrinkled from a long day. She was one of the best astrophysicists in the country, maybe in the world. She looked at his screen and her face went pale. That's not possible, she whispered. I know. That object is the size of a city, no bigger, and it's slowing down. I know. They stared at the screen together. Natural objects didn't slow down in space. Meteors didn't break. Asteroids didn't change speed. Only one thing could slow down like that. Something with engines. Within an hour, monitoring stations across the world were reporting the same thing. Something enormous had entered the solar system, and it was heading toward Earth. Not falling toward Earth, not drifting toward Earth. Coming to Earth with purpose and control. The world's governments went into emergency mode. President Do-yoon Choi of South Korea was woken at 3 in the morning with the news. By sunrise, every major leader on the planet was in emergency meetings. The United Nations building in New York filled with diplomats speaking in urgent whispers. Nobody said the word aliens out loud. But everyone was thinking it. For 3 days, the world watched and waited. Telescopes tracked the objects as they got closer. There were multiple ships, not just one. A whole fleet moving together like a school of fish. The largest was 15 kilometers long, bigger than any city, bigger than any mountain. Minho didn't go home. He stayed at the monitoring station, watching the screens, drinking coffee until his hands shook. Jiwon worked beside him, calculating trajectories and speeds, trying to understand what they were seeing. They're going to stop at the moon, she said on the 3rd day. They'll reach lunar orbit in 6 hours. She was right. 6 hours later, the alien fleet settled into a perfect orbit around Earth's moon. They hung there in space, dark and massive and wrong. Humanity had never felt so small. The ships didn't look like anything from human imagination. They weren't flying saucers or sleek rockets. They were angular and strange, covered in structures that served purposes nobody could guess. Lights flickered across their surfaces in patterns that might have been communication, or might have been something else entirely. Then they sent the message. It came in every language. Korean, English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, all 4,000 languages that humans spoke. The same message, transmitted to every radio, every television, every computer on the planet. The voice was flat and mechanical, translated by machines that understood human speech but not human emotion. We are the Valtherian Empire. You are Planet 848 in our expansion zone. You will surrender your resources and submit to integration into our empire. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. If you refuse, your species will be eliminated. This is not negotiable. This is not a discussion. Comply or face extinction. The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. The world went silent. Then it started screaming. In Seoul, people ran through the streets. Some toward their homes, some away from them, some in no particular direction because direction didn't matter when the sky was falling. In New York, in Tokyo, in London, in Mexico City, the same panic spread like fire. Do-yoon sat in the emergency council chamber deep beneath the Blue House. Around him were military generals, scientists, diplomats, and leaders from every major nation connected by video link. They all looked as terrified as he felt. We need to negotiate, said one diplomat. Negotiate what? Snapped a Chinese general. They said it's not negotiable. We need to fight, said an American admiral. Fight with what? Asked a Russian scientist. They crossed space between stars. We barely made it to Mars. The arguments went in circles. Fight or surrender. Resist or comply. Die with dignity or live as slaves. Nobody had a good answer because there was no good answer. Minho watched from the monitoring station as military forces around the world mobilized. Fighter jets took to the skies. Ships left harbors. Missiles were armed. Humanity was preparing for war with an enemy they didn't understand against technology they couldn't match. It's suicide, Jiwon said quietly. Maybe, Minho replied, but it's our suicide. Our choice. He looked at his screens, at all the data flowing in from the alien fleet. They were scanning everything. Radio waves, television broadcasts, internet traffic. They were downloading humanity's entire digital history, sucking up information like a vacuum. They wanted to understand humans before they destroyed them. Standard procedure, probably. Know your enemy. That gave Minho an idea. A crazy, desperate idea that would probably get him fired or arrested. But the world was ending anyway, so what did he have to lose? He started compiling a file. Not random data. Something specific. He pulled from military archives, from history databases, from museums and libraries and universities. He worked for hours while Jiwon slept in a chair, and the sun rose on what might be humanity's last day. The file was enormous when he finished. Hundreds of terabytes of information, all carefully organized and labeled. He titled it, Human Conflict History Complete Military Record. Then he uploaded it to the Planetary Broadcast Network, making sure it would be impossible to miss. The alien scanners would grab it automatically. They would download it and analyze it and try to understand what it meant. And maybe, just maybe, they would realize they had made a terrible mistake. Minho leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He had done all he could. The rest was up to the aliens and whatever poor soul on their ships had to read through humanity's bloody history. He almost felt sorry for them. In orbit around the moon, the Valtherian flagship received the transmission. Automated systems flagged it as significant and routed it to the analysis division. A junior officer named Hyuk was assigned to review it. Hyuk had been human once, taken from a colony ship that tried to leave Earth decades ago. The Valtherians had captured him and forced him into service. He remembered Earth, remembered being human, but those memories felt like dreams now. He opened the file out of curiosity. Just another primitive species attempt at communication, probably. Begging for mercy or offering worthless tributes. What he saw made his blood freeze. This wasn't begging. This was a warning. And humanity had no idea just how terrifying their warning really was. Hugh stared at his screen for a long time before he started reading. The file was massive, organized into sections by time period and region. It started thousands of years ago and continued right up to the present day. The first section was about something called the Punic Wars. 2 human civilizations fighting over trade routes and territory. The details made Hyuk uncomfortable. Armies of thousands meeting on battlefields fighting until one side was destroyed. The winning side then salted the earth of the losing city so nothing would ever grow there again. That was just the beginning. He scrolled through section after section. The Mongol invasions where human warriors on animals conquered half a continent. Wars in Europe where humans developed new weapons specifically to kill each other more efficiently. Guns, cannons, explosives. Then came the World Wars. Yuk had to stop reading several times. The numbers were too big to comprehend. Millions dead. Entire cities burned to ash. Humans building bombs that could destroy everything within kilometers. And they used them. On each other. He read about trench warfare, where humans sat in mud for years shooting at other humans across a few hundred meters of empty ground. He read about aerial bombing, where humans dropped explosives on civilian cities to break enemy morale. He read about submarines hunting cargo ships, about tanks crushing infantry, about gas weapons that melted lungs. The Valtherians had fought wars. Every species did, but nothing like this. Nothing so constant, so innovative, so completely focused on destruction. Yuk kept reading because he couldn't stop. The file pulled him forward like gravity. He learned about nuclear weapons. Humans had invented bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They built thousands of them. They pointed them at each other and came within minutes of using them multiple times. The file included something called mutually assured destruction, a doctrine where humans accepted that everyone might die as long as the enemy died too. What kind of species thought like that? He read about Vietnam, where a technologically superior force fought guerrilla warriors for years and lost. He read about urban combat in dozens of cities, where every building became a fortress and every street a killing zone. He read about improvised explosives made from fertilizer and fuel, about tactics for fighting when outnumbered and outgunned, about human soldiers who kept fighting even when they knew they would die. The file included tactical manuals, actual instruction books on how to wage war, Sun Tzu's Art of War, written thousands of years ago and still studied. Clausewitz's theories on total war, modern counterinsurgency doctrine, special forces training materials, urban warfare guides, chemical weapons deployment strategies. Humans had spent thousands of years studying how to kill each other. They had universities dedicated to it. They gave medals to people who were good at it. They wrote songs and poems and stories celebrating it. Hugh found a section on human psychology and combat, studies on how to make soldiers willing to die for abstract concepts like honor or duty, research on breaking enemy morale, analysis of suicide tactics used by multiple human cultures across different time periods. One document described Japanese pilots in World War II who flew explosive-filled planes directly into enemy ships, killing themselves to damage the enemy. Hundreds of them did it voluntarily. The file noted that similar suicide tactics had appeared in multiple human conflicts across different regions and time periods. It wasn't an aberration. It was a pattern. Hugh stood up and walked to Commander Velthor's office. His hands were shaking. He had to make the commander understand what they were facing. Velthor listened to Hugh's report with obvious impatience. He was a veteran of 83 successful conquests. He had broken species more advanced than humans. This was routine. They have chemical rockets and nuclear fission bombs, Velthor said dismissively. We have ships that can cross between stars. The technology gap is insurmountable. It's not about technology, Hyuk insisted. It's about psychology. Commander, humans have been at war for their entire recorded history. They've spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. Not fighting other species. Fighting each other. All species have wars, not like this. Sir, the Valtharians unified after the Third Continental War 2,000 years ago. We've had peace since then. Every species we've conquered had similar histories. War was something that happened occasionally, then ended when rational actors recognized the futility of continued conflict. Yuck pulled up a graph on his datapad. Humans have fought approximately 14,000 wars in 5,000 years. They've had peace for maybe a few decades total, in scattered regions. War isn't an aberration for them. It's their default state. Then they'll be easy to defeat, Velthor said. Divided they fall. You're not understanding. They're not just willing to fight. They're good at it. They've refined tactics for every possible scenario. Defending cities, open warfare, guerrilla resistance, asymmetric combat. They've studied every possible way to kill and be killed, and they've written it all down for future generations to learn from. Hugh showed the commander a passage from a human military manual on defending against superior forces. It recommended scorched earth tactics, civilian militias, prolonged resistance, and accepting massive casualties to inflict minor damage on the enemy. They already know they can't win, Hyuk said. They're not planning to win. They're planning to make us bleed. Velthor stood and looked out his viewport at the small blue planet below. It looked so peaceful from orbit. White clouds, blue oceans, green continents. Hard to believe something dangerous lived there. Your concern is noted, Velthor said finally, but our orders are clear. The invasion proceeds in 6 hours. Prepare the landing forces. Yuk returned to his station feeling sick. He pulled up the human file again and kept reading. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. He found a section on human resistance movements, groups who fought occupying forces for years, decades, even generations. They used tactics that seemed irrational to any civilized species, hiding among civilians, using their own people as shields, sacrificing their own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy. One entry described a human city under siege. Rather than surrender, the defenders destroyed their own water supply to prevent the enemy from using it. They starved themselves to deny the enemy resources. When the city finally fell, there was nothing left worth conquering. Another entry described partisans who fought occupying forces for years after their government officially surrendered. They lived in forests and mountains, raiding enemy supply lines, killing isolated soldiers, making occupation so expensive that the enemy eventually withdrew. The file included casualty statistics. In one human war, 9 million soldiers died. In another, 20 million civilians were killed deliberately as a tactic to break enemy morale. It didn't work. The enemy fought harder. Hyuk found himself reading the section on human evolution. Humans were persistence predators. They hunted by chasing prey until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They were pack hunters with complex social hierarchies. They were omnivores who could eat almost anything and survive in almost any environment. They were generalists. adaptable, and apparently incapable of knowing when they were beaten. The file ended with a recent entry, something from just before the Valtharians arrived. It was a quote from a human military leader named Young Su, speaking to his forces. "They think we'll surrender when we calculate the odds. But humans don't surrender because of math. We surrender when we choose to, and we haven't chosen to yet." Yuk closed the file and looked at the clock. 4 hours until the invasion. He thought about warning the landing forces, preparing them for what they would face. But what would he say? That the primitives were dangerous? That chemical weapons and guerrilla tactics might actually work? They would laugh at him. So Hayuk sat at his station and watched the preparations continue. Dropships loading with soldiers, weapons being armed, battle plans being finalized, everything proceeding according to standard doctrine. And on Earth, humanity prepared for war in the only way it knew how. Not with speeches or ceremonies, but with quiet determination and cold calculation. In bunkers and bases around the world, military leaders dusted off old tactics and invented new ones. They didn't plan to win. They planned to make the aliens regret coming to Earth. The countdown continued. 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. Then the dropships launched and humanity's warning became reality. The first Valtharian dropships entered Earth's atmosphere over Southeast Asia. They were massive, each carrying 2,000 soldiers and enough firepower to level a city. They descended in perfect formation, their shields glowing as they pushed through the air. The humans let them land. Commander Velthor watched from orbit as his forces touched down in a forested region near what humans called Thailand. The landing was textbook perfect. Soldiers deployed, established a perimeter, set up defensive positions. Within an hour, they had a secure base covering 5 square kilometers. Then the forest started shooting. The attacks came from everywhere and nowhere. Small arms fire from the trees. Explosives detonated on patrol routes. Soldiers disappeared from guard posts without a sound. The Valtharians had superior sensors and scanning equipment, but the humans didn't care. They attacked anyway, died in the attempt, and the next wave attacked from a different direction. Sergeant Taijin sat in a tree 300 meters from the Valtharian perimeter. He was covered in mud and leaves, nearly invisible. He'd been in the tree for 6 hours, not moving, barely breathing. His rifle was old, built by humans for killing other humans. Against alien shields and armor, it shouldn't have been effective. But Taijin wasn't shooting at armored soldiers. He was shooting at sensors and communication equipment. Things the shields didn't protect because the Valtharians never thought anyone would target them. He fired 3 shots, quick and precise, then dropped from the tree and ran. He was a kilometer away before the aliens figured out where the shots came from. They bombarded the empty forest with energy weapons, burning acres of trees. Taijin didn't care. He was already moving to his next position. In the cities, the resistance took different forms. The Valtharians had expected urban combat to be easier. Buildings provided cover for their troops, and their superior weapons should have given them complete control. They were wrong. Every building was a fortress. Every street had traps. Humans had rigged entire city blocks with explosives waiting for alien patrols. When the Valtharians entered a district, humans would detonate everything at once, bringing down buildings on top of the invaders. The tactic killed thousands of human civilians who hadn't evacuated. The humans did it anyway. In Seoul, civilian engineer Jisu worked in a collapsed subway tunnel with a dozen volunteers. They were connecting the subway system to the city's gas lines, creating a network that could pump explosive vapor into any street on command. It was insane. It would kill humans as easily as aliens, but the alien occupation of the city center had to be stopped, and Jisu couldn't think of any other way. "How much longer?" asked a young volunteer named Minji. 2 hours, Jisu replied, splicing another wire. "Maybe 3. Depends on if the aliens scan this deep." They didn't have 3 hours. A Valtharian patrol found their access point and deployed gas of their own, something that knocked humans unconscious in seconds. Jisu managed to trigger the detonation before she passed out. The explosion turned 6 city blocks into a crater. 300 aliens died. 1,400 humans died. By any military logic, it was a terrible trade. The humans kept doing it. Admiral Youngsu stood in the command bunker watching the casualty reports scroll across his screens. The numbers were horrific. Hundreds of thousands of humans dead in the first week. Entire cities damaged or destroyed. Military units decimated. But the aliens were dying too. They've committed 40% of their landing forces to Southeast Asia alone, reported Colonel Hodgin, studying the tactical map. They expected resistance to collapse after the initial assault. Instead, it's intensified. What are their casualty rates? Young-Soo asked. Estimated 15%, maybe 20. Young-Soo nodded slowly. And ours? 30% of engaged forces. 40% in urban areas. The numbers should have been devastating. In any normal war, those casualty rates would mean defeat. But this wasn't a normal war. The Valtharians were supposed to conquer Earth in days with minimal losses. Instead, they were bleeding from 1,000 cuts. They're requesting reinforcements, Hajin continued. 3rd and 4th battle groups. That's another 30,000 soldiers. Good, Young-Soo said. The more they commit, the more it costs them. What about the biological weapons? Hajin hesitated. Dr. Unji says they're ready. But sir, deploying them in occupied zones means killing our own people. Thousands of them. I know. Young-Soo's face was like stone. Give the order. Deploy in Zone 7 and Zone 12. Evacuate anyone who can be evacuated. For everyone else, he paused. Make it quick. The biological weapons were tailored specifically to Valtharian physiology. Dr. Iunji had designed them based on samples recovered from the battlefield. They were airborne, fast-acting, and horrible. The Valtharians in Zone 7 started showing symptoms within hours. Their respiratory systems liquefied. They drowned on dry land, unable to breathe, their own bodies betraying them. The humans in the zone died too, because the weapon didn't discriminate and there hadn't been time to evacuate everyone. Velthor watched the reports with growing horror. His forces were dying of diseases that hadn't existed a week ago. The humans had engineered biological weapons specifically to kill Valtharians. It should have been impossible. It took years to develop that kind of targeted pathogen. The humans had done it in 6 days. They're using chemical weapons in Sector 8, reported his tactical officer. Artillery shells filled with compounds that bypass our shield frequencies. Casualties are significant. Nuclear response authorization? Asked the weapons officer. Velthor considered it. They had the authorization to use strategic weapons if necessary. One nuclear strike could eliminate a human city and break their resistance. But the humans had nuclear weapons too. And they had already proven they were willing to use them on themselves if it meant killing aliens. Negative, Velthor said finally. Continue conventional operations. Request additional reinforcements from High Command. The reinforcements arrived 2 weeks later. 50,000 more soldiers. Advanced weaponry, new tactical doctrines developed specifically for urban combat. The Valtharians launched a coordinated offensive across 6 continents simultaneously. It should have been the end. Instead, it was just more of the same. In the Amazon, human guerrillas used the jungle like their ancestors had for thousands of years. The Valtharians couldn't see them, couldn't track them, couldn't fight an enemy that attacked and disappeared like smoke. In the mountains of Central Asia, resistance fighters used caves and tunnels, emerging to strike supply convoys before vanishing underground. The Valtharians bombed the mountains flat, killing thousands. The resistance kept fighting. In the Pacific, human submarines hunted Valtharian supply ships moving between Earth and the orbital fleet. The submarines were primitive, slow, vulnerable. They attacked anyway, launching torpedoes they knew might not even penetrate alien shields. Some attacks worked. Most didn't. The humans kept attacking. Tajin's resistance cell in the ruins of Seoul had shrunk from 30 fighters to 8. They were exhausted, half-starved, running out of ammunition. They had no hope of victory, no chance of survival. We should retreat to the countryside, suggested one fighter, a teenager named Borum who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Retreat to what? Tajin asked. They'll find us eventually. Better to die here, making them pay for every building. That night, his cell rigged the remains of a shopping complex with every explosive they had left. When a Valtharian patrol entered, Tajin detonated everything. The blast killed 200 aliens. It also killed Tajin and all 7 of his fighters. The next day, a new resistance cell moved into the ruins and started preparing similar traps. On the orbital flagship, Hugh compiled a report for Commander Velthor. The numbers were undeniable. The Valtharians had lost 35% of their committed forces. Equipment losses were even higher. And the humans showed no signs of surrender. They're not fighting to win, Yuk explained. They're fighting to make conquest too expensive to maintain. Every zone we occupy requires massive troop deployment. Every supply line is vulnerable. Every victory costs more than it gains. Then we'll increase force commitment, Velthor said. Request additional battle groups. Request orbital bombardment authorization. Sir, with respect, that's exactly what they want. The more resources we commit, the more it costs the Empire. This is one pre-FTL planet. We've lost more soldiers here than in the last 50 conquests combined. Velthor slammed his hand on the desk. We cannot retreat. The Valtherian Empire has never retreated. Then what do we do? Hugh asked quietly. Because they're not going to surrender. They're going to fight until either we kill every last one of them or we leave, and killing them all might cost us everything we have. Velthor had no answer. That night he sent a message to the High Command. It was the hardest message he'd ever composed. Request immediate reinforcement. Recommend reclassification of System 848. Humans are not surrendering. Recommend extinction protocol authorization. The response took 3 days to arrive. When it came, it changed everything. Reinforcement denied. Withdraw all forces immediately. Reclassify System 848 as Forbidden Zone. No further contact authorized. Velthor read the message 3 times. Unable to believe it. The Valtherian Empire was retreating. For the first time in its history. Velthor demanded an explanation. He had never retreated from anything in his life. The Valtherian Empire didn't retreat. They conquered or they destroyed. There was no third option. The High Command's response was brief and terrifying. Analysis of human archive data complete. Imperial Strategic Council has reviewed all materials. Conclusion: humans represent Class Omega threat. Cannot be integrated. Cannot be conquered within acceptable parameters. Must be contained. Attached to the message was a classified file. Velthor opened it with security clearance that only senior commanders possessed. What he read made him understand why the Empire was afraid. The Imperial analysts hadn't just studied human military history. They had studied human evolution, human psychology, human development patterns. They had looked at everything that made humans what they were. The report was 3,000 pages long. Velthor forced himself to read all of it. Humans were persistence predators. Their ancestors hunted by chasing prey for hours or days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They could run farther than almost any other animal on Earth. They could survive with less water, less food, less rest. They just kept going. That trait transferred to warfare. Human soldiers could march for days with minimal supplies. They could fight while wounded, starving, exhausted. Their military training specifically taught them to keep functioning when their bodies wanted to quit. Humans were pack hunters with complex social structures. They formed bonds that made them willing to die for each other, not for practical reasons. For emotional ones, a human would sacrifice themselves to save a stranger from their group, knowing they would gain nothing from it. The report included examples: soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to save their squad, pilots staying in burning planes to steer away from populated areas, medics running into gunfire to reach wounded comrades. Illogical behavior by any rational standard, but completely predictable human behavior. Humans were omnivorous generalists. They could eat almost anything and survive in any environment: desert, jungle, Arctic, urban, mountains, plains. They had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every possible climate. They didn't need specialized equipment to survive. They made do with whatever was available. In warfare, that meant they could fight anywhere. They didn't need supply lines as much as other species. They improvised weapons, shelter, and tactics from whatever materials they found. Cut them off, and they found ways to survive anyway. But the most terrifying section of the report was about human innovation. Humans treated war as a problem to solve. When they encountered a new weapon or tactic, they studied it, adapted to it, and developed countermeasures, usually within weeks, sometimes within days. The report traced human weapon development through history. Stone tools to bronze weapons took thousands of years. Bronze to iron took hundreds. But once humans developed the scientific method, innovation accelerated exponentially. Gunpowder weapons appeared and spread across the planet in decades. Aircraft went from invention to military dominance in one generation. Nuclear weapons went from theory to deployment in 3 years. Human warfare innovation follows an exponential curve, the report stated. Each generation develops weapons their parents couldn't imagine. They do this while simultaneously fighting wars that would cripple less adaptable species. The analysts had run projections. If humans developed faster than light travel, they would spread across the galaxy rapidly. They would initially fight among themselves for resources, which would further accelerate their military development. Eventually, they would unify, not through peace but through competition for external threats. A unified humanity with FTL capability would represent an existential threat to every known species, the report concluded. They fight constantly, innovate relentlessly, and refuse to surrender even when defeat is mathematically certain. Recommend immediate containment. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not allow FTL technology development. The final page contained a single sentence that Velthor would remember forever. Humanity has fought approximately 14,000 wars in 5,000 years. War is not an aberration for this species. War is their natural state. They are not warriors. They are war itself. Velthor closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. He thought about the soldiers he'd lost. The battles that should have been easy victories. The humans who kept fighting when any rational being would have surrendered. He finally understood. The humans weren't brave or noble or even particularly skilled. They were just doing what they'd always done, fighting, adapting, surviving. It was as natural to them as breathing, and the galaxy had no defense against a species for whom war was natural. On Earth, Lieutenant Minho watched his screens as the alien fleet began repositioning. They were withdrawing from combat zones, pulling back to orbital positions. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're leaving," he said to Jiwon. "Are you sure? Look at the formation. That's a retreat pattern. They're disengaging." Within hours, it became obvious. The Valtharians were leaving Earth. Not all at once, but systematically pulling their forces back to their ships. The fighting didn't stop immediately. Some human units not receiving the news that the war was ending continued their attacks. Some Valtharian units, trapped behind human lines, fought desperate rearguard actions as they retreated. But the invasion was over. The aliens were leaving. Minho made a decision. He had sent one message that the aliens received. He would send another. He compiled information carefully, not technical data or military secrets, but something else. A message from humanity to the galaxy. He worked through the night, choosing his words carefully. The message he broadcast was simple and direct. You came to our world expecting surrender. You found war. You thought we would calculate the odds and submit. You were wrong. We don't surrender because the odds are against us. We fight because fighting is what we do. We lose battles and come back stronger. We lose wars and rebuild. We face extinction and adapt. You've seen what we do to each other when we fight over resources and borders. Imagine what we'll do when we come for you. Minho attached a single image to the message. The famous pale blue dot photograph, Earth seen from the edge of the solar system, tiny and insignificant against the vastness of space. Below it, he added a caption written by Captain Sora, a fighter pilot who had died defending Beijing. This is our world. You tried to take it. Remember how that ended. Remember that we're still here. And remember that someday we're coming to the stars. When we do, the galaxy will remember that Earth was next on your list, and you ran. Minho. Broadcast the message on all frequencies, making sure every ship in the Valtharian fleet would receive it. Then he sat back and wondered if he'd just made things better or worse. On the flagship, Hyuk received the message along with everyone else. He read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Commander Velthor without comment. Velthor read it and felt something he'd never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death or defeat. Fear of the future. Fear of what humans would become if given time. The Valtharian fleet withdrew to the edge of the solar system. They established a perimeter, maintaining distance but keeping Earth under observation. Velthor sent his final report to the High Command. Withdrawal complete. Casualties, 42% of committed forces. Equipment losses, 60%. Mission status, failed. Recommendation, establish permanent quarantine. Earth must be contained. If humans develop FTL capability, consequences will be severe. The High Command's response was immediate. Velthor was not court-martialed for failure. Instead, he was promoted and given a new assignment, Director of the Earth Containment Initiative. His job was simple. Watch the humans, make sure they never left their solar system, use any means necessary to delay their technological development, but no direct contact, no provocation. Above all, do not give them a reason to accelerate their advancement. Back on Earth, the celebrations were brief. People were too exhausted, too traumatized. Cities were ruined. Millions were dead. The victory, if it could be called that, had cost more than most defeats. But they had survived. Against impossible odds, against superior technology. Humanity had survived by doing what it did best, fighting dirty, accepting horrible losses and refusing to quit. Admiral Youngsu addressed what remained of the Planetary Defense Council. His uniform was dirty, his face haggard from weeks without proper sleep. They think isolation will contain us, he said. They think if they keep FTL technology away from us, we'll stay trapped here. They don't understand that we've done our best work when people told us something was impossible. He pulled up a schematic on the main screen. It was preliminary, rough based on observations of Valtherian technology and theoretical physics. This is how we think their FTL drives work, Youngsu explained. We have enough data to begin research. It will take time. Decades, maybe a century. But it's possible. Dr. Yunji stood up from her seat. She looked as exhausted as everyone else, but her eyes were bright with determination. They made a mistake, she said. They showed us we're not alone. They showed us there are others out there, more advanced, yes, but not invincible. They can bleed, they can retreat, they can be afraid. And they showed us something else, added Jiwon, who had traveled from the monitoring station to attend the council. The months after the Valtherian withdrawal were strange. Earth rebuilt, but differently than before. The old divisions between nations didn't disappear completely, but they mattered less. Everyone had seen the ships in orbit. Everyone knew the aliens were still watching. President Doyen stood at the newly constructed United Earth Space Command headquarters in Geneva. The building was half underground, hardened against orbital bombardment powered by fusion reactors developed from captured Valtherian technology. Humanity was learning fast. They're still there, said Admiral Youngsu, pointing to a screen showing the Valtherian fleet at the edge of the solar system. They haven't moved closer, but they haven't left either. Just watching. Let them watch, Doyen replied. What's the status of the FTL research? Youngsu pulled up a report from the science division. Dr. Jiwon and Dr. Yunji had been leading a team of physicists from 40 countries. They were reverse engineering Valtherian technology, studying the wreckage left behind, analyzing every scrap of data collected during the war. They say it's theoretically possible, Youngsu explained. The Valtherians use a method that folds space. We don't understand all the physics yet, but we have the basic concepts. Jiwon estimates we could have a working prototype in 50 years. Too long, Doyen said. They'll interfere before then. What can we do to speed it up? Nothing good. We could skip safety testing, rush the research, take risks. But one mistake could kill everyone on the test ship. Maybe everyone in the system if the field collapses wrong. Doyen thought about it. 50 years was a long time. But humanity had waited thousands of years to reach the stars. A few more decades wouldn't kill them, probably. Continue the research, he said, but prepare for interference. The Valtherians won't want us to succeed. He was right. 6 months later, a probe entered the solar system from a different direction than the Valtherian fleet. It wasn't Valtherian in design. Minho, still working at the monitoring station, tracked it as it passed through the outer planets. It's scanning us, he told Jiwon. Different technology than the Valtherians. Someone else is watching. Within a week, another probe arrived. Then another. Different designs, different scan patterns, all watching Earth. The galaxy was paying attention now. In orbit above a planet 300 light-years from Earth, Hyuk attended a meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 70 species gathered in the massive assembly chamber.
He was there as the Valtherian expert on humanity.
The only person present who had been human himself. The council was discussing the human question. We should destroy them now, argued Ambassador Vren of the Korthan Dominion. Before they develop FTL, a single strike eliminate the planet and the threat. That would violate every treaty regarding pre-FTL species, countered Representative Scylla of the Sarnat Collective. We have laws against genocide. Laws exist to protect civilization, Vren shot back. The humans aren't civilized. They're animals. Did you read the Valtherian report? 14,000 wars. They've never stopped fighting. Neither have the Korthan, Scylla replied coolly. Your species had 3 civil wars in the last century. That's different. We fight over legitimate political disagreements. Humans fight over everything. Resources, religion, borders, ideas. They even fight for entertainment. The argument went in circles for hours. Some species wanted to quarantine Earth forever. Some wanted diplomatic contact once humans developed FTL. Some wanted military intervention now, before it was too late. Commander Velthor, attending as military advisor, finally spoke. You didn't fight them, he said quietly. The chamber fell silent. You didn't watch your soldiers die in ways you never imagined. You didn't see them sacrifice their own cities to hurt you. They're not ready for the galaxy, and the galaxy isn't ready for them. So what do you propose? Asked the council chair, an ancient being whose species had been spacefaring for 10,000 years. Containment, Velthor said. We maintain the quarantine. We delay their development however we can. Sabotage is acceptable. Interference is acceptable. But direct military action will only accelerate their advancement. They learn from conflict. Every challenge makes them stronger. We can't contain them forever, Scylla said. I know. Velthor's expression was grim. But we can buy time. Time to prepare. Time to develop defenses. Time to hope they change. Do you think they'll change? Asked the chair. Velthor thought about the human file he'd read. Thousands of years of constant warfare. Evolution shaped by competition and violence. A species that treated fighting as normal as breathing. No, he admitted. I don't think they'll change. I think someday they'll come to the stars. And when they do, everything will change for the rest of us. The council voted to maintain the quarantine. Earth was officially designated Forbidden World 001. No contact, no trade, no communication. Any ship attempting to approach Earth would be destroyed by the combined fleet of 70 civilizations. It was the strongest quarantine ever imposed on a single planet. On Earth, life continued. Cities rebuilt, populations recovered. The world's military forces, instead of demobilizing, expanded. Every major nation maintained massive standing armies. Universal military service became common. Orbital defense platforms were constructed from salvaged alien technology. Humanity was preparing, not for another invasion, for something bigger. In a secret facility beneath the mountains in Korea, Dr. Jiwon supervised the construction of humanity's first FTL test vehicle. It was small, unmanned, based on incomplete understanding of physics that wouldn't be fully discovered for another century. This won't work, said her assistant, a young physicist named Daehyun. Probably not, Jiwon agreed, checking the calculations again. But we have to try. Every failure teaches us something. They activated the drive on a cold morning in December. The test vehicle hung in space, surrounded by monitoring equipment and emergency containment fields. Jiwon counted down from 10, then activated the experimental drive. The vehicle disappeared, not into FTL. It just exploded, torn apart by forces nobody had predicted. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief flash of light in the darkness. Back to the drawing board, Jiwon said, already pulling up the data. But look at this. We got 0.4 seconds of stable field generation before collapse. That's longer than last time. Last time it exploded in 0.2 seconds, Daehyun said. This is progress? This is progress, Jiwon confirmed. At this rate, we'll have a stable field in about 300 more tests. She was optimistic. It took 700 tests over 12 years before they achieved a stable field for more than 3 seconds. But each failure taught them something. Each explosion revealed new physics. Each disaster brought them closer to success. The Valtherians watched from the edge of the solar system. They saw the explosions. They knew what humans were attempting. They sent probes to interfere. Subtle sabotage to slow the research. It didn't work. Every time they sabotaged something, humans adapted. They moved research to new locations. They developed better security. They learned from the interference and became harder to stop. Minho, now promoted to Director of Space Monitoring, tracked the Valtherian probes. "They're trying to slow us down," he reported to the Command Council. "It's working, but not enough. We're still making progress." "How long until we have working FTL?" asked Admiral Youngsu, now elderly but still serving. 30 years, Jiwan estimated. Maybe 40. "We keep hitting problems we don't know how to solve." "But we're learning." 30 years was a long time. But humanity had patience when it mattered. Around the galaxy, species watched and worried. The Valtherians maintained their quarantine fleet. Other civilizations contributed ships and resources. Everyone understood the implications. When humans achieved FTL, everything would change. Some species prepared by building defenses. Some tried to develop better weapons. Some formed alliances and mutual defense pacts. A few, the smallest and weakest, considered running to the edges of known space and hoping humanity never found them. In the Valtherian Imperial Archives, a new classification was created just for Earth. The entry was brief but comprehensive. Forbidden World, 001, Earth. Species, human. Status, contained. Threat level, existential. Recommendation, monitor indefinitely. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not allow technological advancement. Above all, delay FTL development as long as possible. The entry included a note added by Commander Velthor, now retired but still consulting on the human question. They will achieve FTL eventually. Nothing we do will stop them permanently. They are too persistent, too innovative, too stubborn. The only question is when, not if. I recommend the galaxy prepare accordingly. On Earth, in the underground facility in Korea, Dr. Jiwan supervised the 1,000th test of the FTL drive. She was 60 years old now, gray-haired and tired, but she'd spent her entire life working toward this moment. "All systems ready," reported the control center. "Begin test sequence," Jiwan ordered. The unmanned test vehicle activated its drive. Space folded around it. For 3 seconds, it existed in 2 places simultaneously, here and 1,000,000 kilometers away. Then the field collapsed and the vehicle exploded. But for 3 seconds it had worked. "We did it," Daehyun said, staring at the data. He was middle-aged now, had spent his career on this project. "It actually worked."